I'd been riding for 3 days through dry country when I finally saw the rooftop. The bank clerk said the place was abandoned, no water, no kin, no reason left to squat. But from the ridge, I could see a thin trickle of smoke curling from the chimney like a lie waiting to be caught. The farmhouse sat in a cradle of cottonwoods, fence rails mostly upright, a small garden thriving under the late spring sun. Chickens pecked the ground. Horses stood tied near a hitching post. Someone lived here. That much was certain. I dismounted, still holding the folded deed the bank had notarized and sealed. My name, Wade Langston, was right there in black ink. So why did this place look like it belonged to someone else? Before I could even step onto the porch, the front door creaked open. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, sharp-eyed with sun-darkened skin, and a coil of dark hair twisted up behind her head. She didn't flinch when she saw me, just squared her shoulders and let her hands rest on her hips like she was ready to draw iron if needed. "You're trespassing," she said, plain and cold. "We've got sick folk inside and no time for peddlers." I raised the deed slowly. "Name's Wade Langston. I bought this land last month. Bank said it was foreclosed and cleared. I'm not here to cause trouble." She didn't even glance at the paper. 2 more women stepped into view behind her. Sisters by the looks of them. One was tall with ash-blonde hair and a hard stare. The other younger, maybe 18 or 19, barefoot with her arms crossed tight. The first woman finally spoke. "I'm Ruby Callahan. This here's my land, been in my family 20 years. I took a breath. "You got paperwork?" Ruby nodded to the tall one, Clarabelle, she called her. Clarabelle disappeared inside and returned with a crinkled envelope wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was an older deed, written in fine script and dated nearly 2 decades earlier. It bore the same parcel number and a surveyor's stamp. Mine looked newer, glossier, but suddenly cheap. "Someone's lying," I muttered. "That'd be the bank," Ruby said. "You ain't the first man they've sent with a deed like that." The weight in my stomach dropped. I looked back at my horse, then at the house. Laundry fluttered in the breeze. A small wooden swing creaked in the cottonwood. This wasn't a squatter's hovel. This was a home. "Look," I said, folding my paper. "I'm not looking to steal anything, but I paid good money. Maybe we can sort this peaceful. Find out who's doing the lying." Ruby studied me. Her jaw was tight, but her eyes weren't cruel. "You really want to find the truth, Wade Langston?" I nodded. "Yeah. Then don't sleep in that barn tonight. Too many men sent here with lies never made it back to town." My fingers tightened around the reins. The land was more tangled than I'd thought, and I wasn't sure whose side of the story I'd just ridden into. But I wasn't leaving, not yet. I slept on the porch, rifle within arm's reach, eyes never fully closed. The Callahan sisters took turns keeping watch through the night, though they didn't say so outright. I could hear their footsteps inside, quiet, deliberate, no panic. But no peace either. At dawn, Ruby brought me coffee in a chipped blue mug and sat on the top step beside me like she didn't quite trust me, but didn't hate me either. "They tried to burn us out," she said, almost casual. I looked at her. "The bank?" She nodded. 6 months back. Claimed we owed back taxes. Sheriff brought papers and 2 deputies. We showed him our deed. Clarabelle's got everything in Mama's name, sealed and witnessed proper. Sheriff backed off, but not for long. Clarabelle appeared then, holding a faded ledger book. She opened it and showed me pages of tax receipts going back 15 years, stamped and signed. All legal. They said we were dead, the youngest one, Ellie added from the doorway. Said we'd all burned in a fire. Claimed they had witness statements and newspaper clippings. But there was no fire, Ruby said, and we sure as hell weren't dead. Clarabelle knelt and opened a biscuit tin she'd kept tucked under the porch. Inside were letters, some recent, some old. She handed one to me. It was addressed to a man named R.F. Mitchell at the county assessor's office. I scanned it. Bank officials claiming the land had no living heirs, urging Mitchell to expedite a claim transfer. There was a scribbled note at the bottom. Already tried once Callahan's still alive. No go unless obits appear. Someone tried to fake your deaths? I asked. Clarabelle heard him, Ruby said. She worked in town at Mrs. Janney's. Boarding house? Bank men stayed the night drunk as devils and loud as mules. Clarabelle nodded. They said it plain. If the sisters won't sell, they'll disappear soon enough. Told the sheriff he'd get a cut once it went through. I stared at them. These weren't wild claims. The paper trail was sloppy, but real. And suddenly my deed felt like a snake coiled in my pocket. So I was part of a con, I said, more to myself than to them. No, Wade, Ruby said. You were the con. They dressed you up in a clean shirt and a saddlebag full of lies and sent you down here to scare us off. I looked at her, really looked this time. Her arms were lean and strong from work. Her face hard-earned, sun-cut, but beautiful in a way that made a man forget every saloon girl in Dodge. I'm not working for them, I said. But I won't ride away and pretend I didn't hear any of this. Ruby's eyes held mine for a long time. Then you'd better be ready to get dirty. Because they're not done. I stood and nodded. Let's find out how deep this hole goes. Behind me, the wind picked up, rustling the cottonwoods. From the barn, one of the horses snorted. Then we'd better start digging, Ruby said. By the third day, it felt like I'd been part of the Callahan household my whole life. I fixed a broken hinge on the barn door. Ellie handed me fence nails without being asked. Clarabelle cooked biscuits that tasted better than anything I'd eaten in years. But none of us let our guard down, especially after Ruby spotted fresh boot tracks by the south fence that didn't belong to any of us. That morning, just after sunrise, a rider came up the trail, slow and easy. But the moment I saw the way he sat, the saddle straight-backed, reins loose, I knew he wasn't a drifter. He was hunting something. Jed Collins, Ruby muttered from the porch. Rifle already in her hands. Banks collector? Hired muscle with a badge when it suits. Him. He dismounted like he owned the place and didn't bother to tie his horse. He looked at me first, then Ruby. You folks are late, he said. Bank ledger says $200 in back taxes, due last week. I'm here to collect or repossess. I stepped forward, holding my deed. I'm the new owner. Wade Langston. You can take it up with the bank. Jed didn't even look at the paper. Funny thing, Mr. Langston, I got 3 other men with deeds just like that. One of them still limping from the last time he showed it to these ladies. Clarabelle stepped down beside me, holding her father's ledger book like a Bible. We've paid taxes every year, got the receipts. Jed spit near my boot. Then you'll show them to the judge. But in the meantime, I get what's due by sundown. Or I take the land. You try and take it, you'll wish you hadn't, Ruby said flatly. His eyes narrowed. You threatening me, Miss Callahan? No, she said. I'm promising you. We've lost too much already. I moved between them, hand near my holster. This land's not yours to take. And you ain't leaving with a cent until we see a court order. Jed stared at me. You think standing with them makes you righteous? It makes you a fool. I've been worse, I said. But I've never watched decent folks be robbed in daylight and done nothing. Yet's mouth curled, but something in my tone made him pause. His hand twitched near his belt, then he turned and swung up onto his horse. Sundown, he called over his shoulder. You best not be here when I come back. We watched him ride off. Ellie looked shaken. Clarabelle's lips were pressed tight. Ruby turned to me. You still think this is just a clerical mix-up, cowboy? I shook my head. No, this is a land grab, a rigged game. But they didn't count on anyone staying in the hand. Ruby half smiled. Then I hope you're better with a rifle than you are with fence posts. I chuckled, but the laughter died quick. Sundown wasn't far off, and men like Jed didn't come alone when they came back. We rode out just before noon, Ruby leading with her rifle slung across her back, Clarabelle with a ledger and deed bundle tied in a satchel, and Ellie clutching her locket like a good luck charm. I brought up the rear, rifle loaded and nerves wooded tight. The plan was simple. We'd ride into town, walk into the recorder's office, and put their evidence on the desk in front of someone too, high up to bribe. But nothing's ever that easy in the West Dot when we crested the last ridge. Overlooking town, Ruby yanked her horse to a halt. "Too many horses at the bank," she said, eyes narrowing. She was right, at least a dozen horses tied up outside. That wasn't normal business traffic. Worse, a few of the men milling about wore dusters heavy. Enough to hide rifles, and one of them was the sheriff. Clarabelle's voice was tight. "They're waiting for us," Ellie whispered. "They knew we'd come. This was the plan all along." I scanned the rooftops and saw the glint of glass, rifle scopes. This wasn't just an ambush. This was a trap with everyone in town pretending not to see. Behind the bank, a shiny black coach sat with gold trim, the kind you only see when money's thick and morals are thin. A man in a tan suit stood beside it, arms crossed, watching the street like he owned it. "That's the one who came to our house last fall," Ruby hissed. "Didn't give his name. Smelled like citrus and paper. What do we do?" Ellie asked. "We run," I said. "Now." "There's no turning back," Ruby snapped. "We're not," I said, pointing east. "There's an old mining trail, cuts around the gorge, steep, narrow, but no one rides it anymore." "They'll follow," Clarabelle warned. "Let 'em," I said. "But not through that trail. We'll bottleneck 'em if they try." We wheeled our horses and galloped east. I didn't look back, but I heard the yells. They'd spotted us. Dot shots rang out, distant but real. A bullet cracked the bark off a mesquite tree near Ruby's head. Another zinged past my boot. But the trail was close now. Ruby turned and fired one shot back, more a warning than a hit. The riders behind us scattered briefly, giving us just enough time to find the path. The mining trail was nearly vertical in parts. Horses skidded and stumbled, but Ruby led without hesitation. Her jaw clenched and reins taut. Dot behind us, I saw. Men hesitate at the mouth of the pass. They weren't eager to chase us into terrain that could swallow a man whole. Dot. By the time we reached the shaded hollow where the old mill once stood, we were shaking with adrenaline. Clarabelle slid from her horse and bent over, hands on knees. "Are we safe?" Ellie asked. "For now," Ruby said. "But they know we've got something they don't want the world to see. And they'll do anything to keep it hidden," I added. "Then we'd better show the world before they catch up." We didn't have long to rest. Ruby's hand never left her rifle. Clarabelle was already sorting through the papers again, checking every folded edge and seal as if the truth might slip out and vanish. I stood at the edge of the hollow, watching the ridgeline for movement. Then I saw dust rising in the West Riders. "They're circling to cut us off," I said. "We ride now or we don't ride at all." Ruby nodded. "Through town?" "It's suicide," Clarabelle said. "It's necessary." Ruby shot back. The plan was reckless, but it was the only one that might work. We'd barrel through town, right under their noses, and escape south toward the railway line. If we could make it to the depot in Millerton, we could hand the evidence over to someone higher than the county, someone who hadn't been bought. We mounted up and rode hard. As we neared the outskirts of town, a rifle cracked from a rooftop too close. Ruby flinched, but didn't fall. "Keep going," I shouted. Gunfire erupted all around us, from windows, porches, even the church steps. Not every bullet was aimed. To kill some were meant to scare, to herd. These men didn't want a shootout. They wanted silence. We kicked through the main street like a lightning strike. Clarabelle's horse stumbled briefly, nearly throwing her. Ellie screamed, pulling up just long enough to steady her before galloping again. A man stepped into the road ahead, shotgun in hand. Ruby didn't blink. She drew and fired once, caught him in the leg. He dropped like a sack. We tore past the saloon, glass shattering behind us. The schoolhouse bell rang someone's idea of a signal. Townsfolk peered from behind curtains, but no one dared come out. When we hit the south edge of town, I spotted riders flanking to intercept. I veered hard east and shouted, through Harper's Ditch. It was a narrow channel, dug for irrigation deep. Muddy, but just wide enough for our horses. We plunged in, hooves churning up water and dirt. One rider followed and got stuck. The others hesitated. By the time we scrambled up the far bank, We'd gained precious seconds. "Keep moving," I yelled. The sound of hooves behind us faded. Either they were regrouping, or they figured the trail would finish us. Ruby glanced back. They didn't expect us to push this hard. "They expected fear," I said, "not a fight." We rode until the land flattened and the sun dropped low in the sky. At last we reached the ruins of an old way station, tucked behind a thicket of scrub and rock. It wasn't much, but it offered shelter and a moment to breathe. Ellie slid off her horse and sat down hard in the dirt, face pale and streaked with dust. Clarabelle clutched the satchel like it was gold. Ruby stood next to me, arms crossed, eyes scanning the distance. "They'll come again," she said. "Let them," I answered. "We've got something they can't afford to lose." She looked at me, fierce and proud and tired. "Then we better make it count." The air inside the old way station was musty and still, dust hanging in sunbeams like suspended breath. We lit a lantern and barricaded the door with crates and rusted barrels. Ruby posted up with her rifle facing the trail, while Clarabelle emptied the satchel onto a dry patch of floor. What spilled out wasn't just a deed or a letter. It was a storm. A thick, red wax-sealed envelope, cracked from time and sun, held half a dozen folded pages, some handwritten, some typed. A bank ledger with entries so specific it made my stomach turn. Bribes, land transfers, fake death notices. Each transaction tied to a name: Judge Torrance, Sheriff Morrison, several town officials. One page listed 27 parcels of land, including the Callahan homestead, marked targeted, reassignment in process. Ruby crouched beside her sister, scanning the records. "Look at this," Clarabelle whispered, tapping a page with shaking fingers. "That man in the tan suit? His name's Pierce Rollins. Hired by the bank as asset reassignment liaison. Says here he was paid $5,000 for our tract alone." I stared. They weren't just forging deeds. They were building a fake history, trying to erase you completely. Ellie pulled out another envelope. Inside were photographs, grainy images of men standing on porches, burning papers, shaking hands. One showed Sheriff Morrison handing a folder to a man with a bank logo on his coat sleeve. "This is enough to sink half the county," I muttered. Ruby looked at me. "And get us all killed if we don't play it right," I paced. The longer we held the evidence, the more dangerous it got. They weren't going to wait much longer. "Someone needs to get this to the Capitol," I said. "Not county court, state level, somebody clean." "I'll go," Ruby said without hesitation. "No," Clarabelle said. "Too risky. Ellie's the fastest." "I'm going," I said. "You three stay hidden." Ruby stood up. "You think they won't stop you on sight?" I met her eyes. "I'm the only one they think they can spin. I still have the fake deed. I walk in with that, act like I'm working with them, and I get close." Clarabelle looked pale. "That's suicide." I shook my head. "It's misdirection. While I keep their eyes on me, you ride out. Ruby, take the documents. Go wide. Cross the river near Thompson's Ford. It's rough country, but you'll avoid the patrols." Ruby's jaw tightened. "What if you don't make it out?" I gave a small smile. "Then at least I gave you the chance." She stepped close enough that I could smell wood smoke in her hair. "You don't have to do this." "I do," I said softly, "because I've been on the wrong side of too many things in my life. This ain't gonna be one of them." She nodded slowly, then pressed the ledger to her chest and turned to pack. I watched her go and felt something tighten in my throat. By sunrise, she was gone riding alone into dangerous country with everything that could bring the house of cards crashing down, and I rode back into town, wearing the face of a man still playing the bank's game. The town felt different when I rode back, intense, watchful. Folks who once tipped their hats now kept their eyes down. I tethered my horse outside the bank and walked inside like I belonged, fake deed tucked in my coat. Pierce Rollins was there, just like before, tan suit, slick hair, cigar clamped in his teeth. But he wasn't lounging now. He was frantic, stuffing papers into a valise and barking at a clerk who looked ready to quit. He glanced up and froze when he saw me. "Well, hell," he said, forcing a grin. Mr. Langston, thought you'd ridden off with your tail tucked. I tossed the deed onto his desk. We need to talk. He picked it up with a smirk, flipping through the pages. You finally see reason? Decide to sell that little scrap. After all, no, I said. I came to ask what happens to men who try to steal what isn't theirs. His eyes narrowed. You came back just to get righteous with me, Langston? No, I said again. I came back to give you a chance, hand over everything. Records, letters, names, confess. Because if you don't, it'll come from someone else. He blinked. What are you talking about? Ruby Callahan, I said. She's on her way to the capital right now with your entire house of lies in her satchel. His face drained. You're bluffing. You think so? I leaned in. That fake deed? I knew it was worthless the moment I saw their garden. No one fakes that kind of life. You picked the wrong family to bury. Rollins reached for a draw a dash fast dot. I drew faster dot. My Colt was pointed between his eyes before he got halfway. Don't, I said. The office door burst open. Not bank guards, federal agents. Marshal Davidson strode in, star glinting under his coat, 2 men flanking him with rifles raised. Mr. Rollins, Davidson said coldly, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Rollins looked like he might melt through the floor. The marshal turned to me. We got the packet, delivered this morning. Miss Callahan rode through the night. I exhaled, my knees nearly gave. You did good, son, Davidson added. Real good. Outside, word spread like wildfire. The sheriff was gone before noon rode. Out with a bag of coin and never looked back. 2 judges were taken in chains. The bank shuttered by evening. And the townsfolk? Some hung their heads. Some cheered. Most just watched, quiet, like they were waking from a long, mad dream. By nightfall, I was riding home. Not as a buyer, not even as a hero. Just as a man who'd finally found something worth fighting for, and someone worth riding back to. Months passed. Spring gave way to a hot, stubborn summer, and the Callahan land blossomed again. Real crops, clean water, and no more men on horseback bringing lies in their saddlebags. I stayed. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I'd found where I belonged. I helped fix the east fence, mended the barn roof after a storm rolled through, taught Ellie how to aim steady and shoot straighter. Clarabelle even let me sit at the kitchen table when she tallied bills, which was as close to a compliment as she gave anyone, but it was Ruby who anchored me. We never said much about that night, her ride through the hills, my bluff in town, the fact we'd both come close to dying. But some things don't need saying. We'd sit on the porch some evenings, just watching the sunset drip gold across the pasture. Her hand would find mine without looking, and that was enough. The state issued full pardons, returned every stolen deed, rewarded whistleblowers like Ruby, though she gave every cent of it back into the land, built a new barn, hired 2 ranch hands, bought more seed. She offered me a corner of the property. My own stake I refused. I didn't earn this land, I said. You did. She frowned. You nearly died protecting it. I didn't protect the land, I said. I protected the people who gave it meaning. Her eyes softened then, and she didn't argue after that. Ellie talked about going east to teach. Clarabelle had her eye on a piece of property across the creek, said she might build her own place someday. But Ruby stayed rooted. And so did I. We never married. Never needed to. Out here, commitment was measured in work, in loyalty, in standing shoulder to shoulder through wind and war. One morning, as I fixed a broken wheel on the wagon, I looked up and saw Ruby on the hill, silhouetted against the sun, hat in one hand, hair loose in the breeze, and I thought, this is what it means to come home. Not because you bought it, not because your name is on paper, but because someone let you in, and you fought like hell to be worthy of staying.